Hi, 8th graders, and welcome to our Monday video. On today is Monday, September 21st. I hope you have started a great week, and I'm going to be doing a little bit of review and the final lesson in this chapter. Once we get through each of the lessons, then a test comes up, and so that test will be next week. And it will probably be Monday or Tuesday. I haven't decided which day yet. But what we will be doing is, like I said, reviewing the previous lesson, doing the final lesson, and then I have created a Jeopardy game online. Now, if you were with me last year, I found a site and it wasn't very user friendly, and so now I've got a different site that I'm using. And you are going to go into the game. You're going to be able to use your book. Now, I will tell you that the game has, it only gives you like 10 seconds to answer the question, and then you reveal the answer. And so what I want you to do is, even if it goes past the 10 seconds, I want you to still look up in your book to see if you can find the answer and then reveal it. Of course, if you know the answer, go ahead and answer it. The way that you're going to do it is you're going to write the answers on a sheet of paper. So you're going to get out a sheet of paper and you are going to write the categories. You'll see the categories once you click on the link. And so you'll see the categories. Don't worry about keeping them all straight in order of $50 or $100. Don't worry about that. Just try to keep them in the categories. If you get the right answer, you get those points. And so I want you to keep track of that. And then I want you to turn in so that you show me that you did complete the game. So you're going to click on the link. You're going to write down the categories across the top of your paper. And then you're going to click on them to see. Now, like I said, it's only going to give you 10 seconds. And so most of you, by the time I read the question and had a moment to think, it had already clicked off. So I don't expect you to get it in the 10 seconds. But what I would like for you to do is, use your book, kind of go through and answer the question, and then and write it down, and then ask it to reveal the answer. So don't reveal the answer until you've had a chance to write something down. And then you're going to turn that in, and I'll make note of that on the has as well. But you're going to turn that in so that I can see that you completed that. If you have problems with it, let me know and I can check it out. So today we are going to do a little bit of review on the previous lesson when we were talking about the objective complements. And remember, this was a word that kind of comes up at the end of the sentence that gives us a little bit more information. But we didn't talk about how to diagram these, and I kind of wanted to separate that out and show you how to diagram with these objective complements. So I want you to turn to page 43 in your pink text. And if you look at the very top, it gives you a sentence, and it shows you how to diagram this. And I was looking for what the original sentence was, but I don't see the original sentence there. But it's the one that it probably went something like Samuel anointed David king is probably very simply what the sentence was. And so we have Samuel is our subject, and then anointed David. Whoops, and that's probably a direct object. Who did he anoint? He anointed David. So that's your direct object. Samuel anointed David. This is a transitive verb, not linking like I just indicated. But then we have that word king, and it's like, where do you stick the word king? Well, here's where you stick it, right here. And it has the backslash line. So it has a backslash like a predicate, nominative, or adjective would, but it's that additional complement. It gives us a little bit more information. Samuel had thought Eliab ideal. And so again, we have that ideal. And it's almost like you're putting a direct object and a predicate, nominative, or adjective in the sentence. That's really what this seems like. Because we have, in the first sentence, Samuel anointed David. And so we put David in the direct object. But then we have king, and that's like predicate nominative. So it's almost like you get both. Samuel had thought Eliab ideal. And Eliab is a direct object. It seems kind of odd that it's a direct object, but it is. But then we have that whole adjective thing going on, the ideal piece. So just be aware of subject, verb, direct object, and then what appears to be a predicate, nominative, or adjective. So it's kind of it's a little bit confusing. So I want you to write these examples down in your notes just so that you can remember them. And I want to do one of the class practice. And so I want you to look at your textbook, and I want you to, where it says on the chalkboard, diagram the sentences and complements. I want you to look at number 3 of B. I couldn't figure out if it was A or B. Rehoboam thought the young men's advice more suitable. So I want you to pause, and I want you to diagram that one. Rehoboam thought I can't remember the rest, the young men's advice more suitable. So hit pause, and then I want you to come back, and we will diagram it together on the board. All right, if you're back, I assume you have diagrammed number 3. And if we ask the questions, who thought, we find out Rehoboam is our subject. What did Rehoboam do? He thought. And then we have to ask the question, what did he thought? Well, he thought advice. I'm going to run out of room. But then we have that additional word that's giving us more information. And so we're going to put suitable here. And that would be how you diagram that. Now, I don't know if you've already done homework on this or not. I can't remember. But I did want to go over this just in case you hadn't. All right. Now let's go to the very last lesson in this section. And I want to talk a little bit about how to study for a grammar test. So one of the things that I like to do is I want you to know the definitions, but I also want you to practically know how to do the work. So I might ask some questions about definitions. It might be short answer. It might be matching. I don't know. But I'm then also going to ask you to do some of those diagrams or to identify different things within the test. So as you're studying, I want you to look at examples in the different chapters. I want you to look at definitions, and I want you to practice diagramming. So I would go back through all the gray boxes, and I would look for anything italicized in your chapter. If you look at page 45, you will see a few little things here italicized. And if you find a section that starts off with a few words italicized, kind of skim over that paragraph and look to see if there's any information that you need to know. I like to use index cards. I like you to use index cards where you can put definitions, different information so that you can kind of flip through it and know your definitions. But I do a blend of, spout out the definition for me, but then also show me how it's used in the sentence. So, like I said, next week we will do the first test, and I want you to start studying now. All right, so we're going to take a look at lesson 9. It's the last lesson in chapter 1. And we are going to be looking at these things or at one item called an appositive. But then we're also looking at some other things that are called independent elements. And a word that is not grammatically related to the rest of the sentence is what we're talking about with independent element. And we'll look at that in just a second. But let's take a first look at appositive. And that is a noun or pronoun used with another noun or pronoun to identify or explain it. So this is kind of easy, and it does have its own little diagramming thing. But if you look at the example right there on page 45, about halfway down, it says, "We boys raked all the leaves." Now, what is the subject in there? Boys or we? Well, we raked. We don't want to, because we're talking, it's first person. We raked the leaves. But they throw this other word in there to tell who. It could have been we adults raked the leaves, or we dogs raked the leaves. So it could be anybody, but this identifies. Here's another one. Janet, my older sister, served lemonade. Well, what's the subject? Sister? No, that's just further clarification. So Janet, my older sister, that's the appositive. Now there's two things, non-restrictive appositives and restricted appositives. Sometimes you absolutely need the appositive in there. That's restricted. If you don't need it, then that's non-restricted. So here's an example. Stephen was stoned outside Jerusalem. Well, that's kind of, if you're a Christian and you've read the Bible, you probably know who Stephen was. So in the context of a Christian community, we really wouldn't need the additional information. However, if we did need more information, then it turns into a restrictive. So let's say that I'm in a group of people who don't know who Stephen was. I could say Stephen, the first Christian martyr, was stoned outside Jerusalem. So sometimes you have to you have to know the context. You have to know your audience. So if you're presenting to your class and they know you and they know your family, you probably don't have to put any additional information in there. But if they don't, you may have to. Here's another one. The Apostle Paul had been present at Stephen's death. But if we all knew who Paul was, and we all knew that he had been there, we wouldn't necessarily have to say. We could say the apostle had been present at Stephen's death. So sometimes it's contingent upon you figuring out, do I need to give additional information here? So sometimes you will need, and sometimes you won't. Now, you might find me in your writing. If you are writing something and you happen to write, my father did all the coding for the government, I might need a little more information. How did he, if you were to say then, my father, the lead computer programmer for the CIA, did all the coding, that might be more information that I would need. You could say, the man took the boy to the hospital. But if you said the man who is a pediatrician, you give me more information. And so sometimes you have to decide whether you need that information or not. Let's take a look sorry, at the way that you diagram these. And if you look at the page 46, about halfway down, where it says the Apostle Paul visited Macedonia, a region of Europe, you will see that it is put in parentheses. So we have Apostle and Paul goes in those parentheses. Visited, or whatever the verb is. I don't know what the verb is. Visited Macedonia. And there's another one, a region of Europe. So get those appositives stuck in your head. Make sure they're written down in your notes. Make sure maybe you even have something at the beginning of your notebook that will remind you of appositives and how they are diagrammed. Now, There are some other independent elements, and if you look on page 46, halfway down, there's, I don't know, 3 or 4, maybe 4. And they're things that we have seen before. If you've been in this program, you've seen some of these before. The first one is called the noun of direct address. Oh, I can't talk. The noun of direct address. It names the person or thing to whom one is speaking. So, if I were to go knock on my neighbor's door and say, Joanne, the cats are climbing up the tree, the noun of direct address is Joanne. I am saying her name. Here's an example. Peter, the calves are in the yard. Here's one from Old English. Ye, bless the Lord, or you that fear the Lord. I'm not sure what the sentence is there. But take a look at how that's diagrammed. So the appositive gets a parentheses around it, but the noun of direct address, and you should write this in your notes, is going to get its own little line. It's that important. So Joanne, the cats are in the yard. So here's Joanne. And then I start my regular diagramming line. Cats are, and then in the yard would be a prepositional phrase. So it gets its own little line. Noun of direct address is really important. It gets its own little line. All right, take a look at the next one. If you're taking notes, I hope you are. An expletive introduces a sentence without adding anything to its meaning. There and it are common, and you can usually omit the expletive without it making much of difference. So if I were to say, there is a surprise waiting for you on the porch, the word there, and then surprise is waiting. The diagramming gets really complicated on all of this. And you'll see that, so there is a surprise waiting for you on the porch. You kind of turn some things around. There is all by itself, just like the direct address. And surprise is waiting is going to be the subject and the verb. There stood a new bicycle for me. Bicycle stood is the subject verb. And the word there is telling us where. So you actually have to look at these words and figure out their function in the sentence. The first one seems like sort of like the noun of direct, or the direct address, got its own line. But then if I can answer the question, where did the bike stand? Adverbs answer the where question. And so that has to go underneath the stood. Those are a little confusing. I'm probably not going to put any of those on the test. I might do noun of direct address and the appositive, but I'm not going to do any of these real complicated ones where the word there or it can be confused as far as where it goes. We may talk about them in class on Wednesday a little bit, just to see if you're kind of understanding, because if you look at the next one, you have the word it. And it can show up as a noun of direct address, or it can show up as the subject. So I don't want to trick you on those, but I do want you to understand you always have to look at what what is the word doing in this sentence. Okay, so that's the expletive. The exclamatory, exclamation, or interjection expresses strong feeling, just like when you were learning the 4 types of sentences: declarative, exclamatory, all those, remember? So exclamation, same thing. And this is where there's going to be a word that jumps up at the beginning that indicates some kind of importance. Lo, this hath touched thy lips. I know some of these examples. The angel that came to the shepherds before Jesus' birth. Lo, there is unto you born a Savior. And again, that word lo gets put out there all by itself on its own line. And here's another example. The pigs, they're ruining the garden. The pigs is not a complete sentence. So it gets its own little thing at the beginning of a sentence. So, or if I yelled, fire, we need to get out of the building. fire would get its own little, that exclamation, or yay, Mom said we could go get ice cream. So yay goes right there in that line all by itself. All right. And then I think it's the last one. No. Number 4. A response such as yes or no is sometimes used at the beginning of a sentence, and it gets the same treatment. In my opinion, it kind of fits in with number 3. Yes, this is the right book. And that gets its own place. That gets its own line. So I kind of fit in yes and no or response kind of things with number 3. But it doesn't really have a name, but it does get that individual line at the beginning. And then finally, parenthetical expressions include phrases such as I think, for example, on the other hand, and we know. These are non-essential to the structure of the sentence, though. So here we have God's people, we know, have often been despised by the world. I would write these examples down. The we know, I think, for example, and on the other hand. Write those down. And here's how you diagram them. They get their own little part of the world. So they're not in the main diagramming line, but they get their own little part of the world right at the beginning. So the main sentence, God's people have often been despised by the world, that's what goes on the main diagramming line. Main diagramming line. Well, what do you do with the we know? Well, it's almost like its own little clause. You're going to put it right there in the front. I mean, there's really no other, you don't want to put it at the end. You want to put it at the front because it's coming right where the subject is. The same thing, for example. How do you diagram that? Well, it's at the beginning. Give it its own little thing, but it's a prepositional phrase. And so you have to diagram it on the diagonal and across. So there's some little things that are starting to come out in 8th grade grammar and writing that we haven't seen before. And what I think might be helpful is that if you have a specific page or two in your notebook that just has diagramming rules across the top, that might actually be really helpful. And maybe we'll go over some of those on Wednesday. But diagramming rules where you put a few of these examples. So then if you're doing your homework, you can flip back to your diagramming page and remember how you're supposed to do that. So there have been several that have come up in both this lesson and the previous. So you have several things that you could go ahead and start your diagramming rules page. So let's do that. And then on Wednesday, for anybody who hasn't watched the video or doesn't have that page, we'll help them get started. So let me remind you of what you are doing for homework. Don't forget to be studying the poem. We will be doing a little check in class. I will read some of the excerpt and you will have to fill it in. So it'll be kind of like a little on the spot. So for those first 4 lines, and then you should be adding a couple more lines. You are doing pages 48 and 49 in the text, A, B, and C all. And then your writing is that you are to complete the interview with your grandparent or older friend or relative. And put that interview into a keyword format and bring it to class on Wednesday. So both your grammar homework and the keyword outline and interview questions should be in your folder that you hand in to me. You are going to turn that in and I'm going to take a look at it next weekend. So I want to see, if you only had 2 interview questions for each topic, then I'm going to come back, I'm going to contact you over the weekend and say, hey, you need to work on this a little bit more. Or if you have 20 questions for each paragraph topic, I'm going to come back and say, you need to trim this down a little bit. So I want to be able to get a good look at that. You are going to be playing the Jeopardy game next week that I talked about. So that'll be next Thursday as a review. And then for your writing next week, you are actually going to take a look at pages 16 to 20 in your pink textbook. And that is on writing friendly letters. Because once we complete this grandparent assignment, you are going to write a friendly thank you letter that you are going to send with the paper, if you want to send the paper with it, to the person that you interviewed. So I just wanted to give you a heads up as to what we were doing. So anyway, if you have any questions before we meet again on Wednesday, please let me know. I am around most of the day on Tuesdays and can answer questions pretty quickly. On Thursday, we will only be meeting just like we did last week. I'm going to meet you in a kind of in an office hours scenario. So it is not mandatory. I would prefer that you play the game and that you study. But I will be available but please come with specific questions. Don't come expecting that I've got content to give you. So if you have questions as you go through your material, please write them down and then come to the office hours and I'll help you with those. So have a wonderful week and I will see you on Wednesday.